This is a University of Otago podcast.
Anaku te rauro, nau te rauro, ka ora ai ta iwi. With your basket and my basket, the people's lives will prosper. E na mana, e na reo, rā rangatira mai, tēnā koutou katoa. As Peter has introduced, I'm Richard Blakey. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Enterprise, and it's my great pleasure to have travelled up from Dunedin today to introduce our inaugural professorial lecture speaker tonight, but also, very importantly, to award Professor Lisa Stamp the 2011 Roheath Trust Award and Carl Smith Medal from the University of Otago. This is one of a number of research medals that we award annually at the University of Otago, and the Roheath Trust Award and Carl Smith Medal is awarded specifically for researchers between 2 and 10 years from completion of their PhD studies. And we have a long history of people being awarded this medal in the early stages of their careers, going on to great things at the university and in their future careers. And it's very pleasing to be able to combine this award with the inaugural professorial lecture for Professor Lisa Stamp, because the award of a professorial appointment at the University of Otago is an extremely challenging process that people have to go through. It's not a promotion that we give out lightly, and it is to be celebrated. That's why I'm here in my full academic regalia to celebrate this very, very significant achievement. And I will make the award to Professor Stamp, but I should just say a few words about Sir Carl Smith, who was a member of the Dunedin community for many, many years in the early and mid-20th centuries, and served for many years, in fact decades, on the University Council, and was a very strong contributor and supporter of the university. And his support extended to the formation of the Roheath Trust. That's why there are two names. The medal is named after Sir Carl Smith. The award of a monetary value is from the Roheath Trust. He set this up to provide ongoing support for activities and support for research at the University of Otago, with the name Roheath relating to the family estate back in the home country. And as well as the award of a medal, it is traditional to award the recipient a copy of a book, a small little book that Sir Carl Smith wrote called New Zealand from N to Z. And I have to tell Lisa, it is in fact a used book, a second-hand book. This book has gone out of print, so there is a collection held at the university, and in fact there are individuals who go around the used book sales finding additional copies so that we have sufficient on reserve to present at occasions like this. I should say yours has a citation and a dedication in it that's completely unrelated to this award. The book, so over time, this book is going to become a very sought after by rare book collectors and recipients of the Carl Smith Medal. It may or may not be something that strikes your fancy, Lisa. I read a review of this book. It is a humorous book that the author kept updating after its first version just after World War II until the early 1960s. It is a light-hearted look at New Zealand and is even occasionally funny. Invariably, the book reflects its period and is pretty patronising about wives and women in general, unfortunately. But some things remain true to modern New Zealand and retain their humour. The obsession with the All Blacks and the fact that Aucklanders are all up and live in a noxious city. So you may cringe at some places and that place as well, given your background, but it may sit on your shelf and be taken out for amusement now and again. With that, I'd like to ask you to come up and receive your medal and the small token. Professor Smith. Now to the lecture, and I will say a few words of introduction about Professor Lisa Stamp. Professor Stamp has an appointment here at the University of Otago in Christchurch both in an academic role and a clinical role as a rheumatologist. She has active research interests in a variety of areas, including interest in the role of drugs such as interleukin-17 in rheumatoid arthritis, and in particular the individualization of drug treatments in rheumatic conditions. Her research is of a very high international standing. At the time of the award of the Carl Smith Medal, in the papers that were presented, she had published 59 papers in international peer-reviewed journals, attracting more than 380 citations. My search just this afternoon indicated that that number of papers had grown from 59 to of the order of 98, so she has had a very productive time since the award of this medal. Professor Stamp obtained her PhD in 2004 from the University of Adelaide. Prior to that, she graduated from the University of Otago with her MBCHB, and prior to that, as I think the cartoon and the music beforehand will attest, with a Diploma of Music in Performance Cello from the University of Auckland. The international and New Zealand-based referees' comments that were received in support of her award praised her broad contributions to the profession and her patients and and her contributions beyond her roles at the University of Otago, including service on a very important New Zealand Pharmac Committee for Rheumatological Drugs, and service on an international steering committee for OMER-CAT, a panel developing new agendas for the management of gout. Before I introduce Professor Stamp, I'd also like to highlight the fact that one of our leading research collaborations, University of Otago research theme, the Otago arthritis theme, is led by Professor Stamp. So with that, I'll ask her to give her public lecture tonight on gout, a disease for New Zealand. Professor Stamp.
Thanks very much, Richard. It feels quite hard to stand up and talk after all that. I kind of feel like it's going to be an anticlimax. I've been told how good all the other lectures have been, and so I know the bar's been set high, but it's really nice to see so many people having come out tonight, so thank you all. Now, as Richard said, I'm going to talk tonight about gout, and many of you will know this is often referred to as a disease of kings. But I think it is fair to say that we could consider this to be a disease of New Zealand, and hopefully tonight I'm going to explain to you why, and also tell you a bit about some of the research that we've been doing in this area. Now, gout's been known about for a very long time. As you'll see from some of the pictures that I'll show tonight, there's a lot of history around gout. In fact, there's been whole books written on the history of gout about the people who've been affected. But it's not just humans that get gout, and I didn't realise this until just recently. But some scientists in America have recently suggested that this friendly fellow here, the Tyrannosaurus rex, got gout. Now, the literal interpretation of Tyrannosaurus rex is tyrant king of the lizards or tyrant king of the dinosaurs. And so here is yet another reference to kings in gout. And what they discovered when they were examining the skeleton of this dinosaur was these abnormalities in the bones, and these are bones from the fingers and toes of the dinosaur. And what I've circled here in red, you can see these sort of holes in the bones, and it's probably not projecting particularly well on this X-ray, but also these holes could be seen on the X-ray. And these holes are virtually identical to the holes or the damage that we see in the bones of patients with gout. And this led these researchers to conclude that indeed this Tyrannosaurus rex suffered from gout. Now, the other thing that I read about this dinosaur is that it's carnivorous, grumpy, and loud. And that led me to wonder whether any of these two features will be related to gout. Now, I'm sure some of you will have heard that there's a great relationship between diet and gout, and in particular red meat is one of those things that people often talk about. So I think the fact that this was a carnivorous dinosaur was probably important. Now, far be it from me to comment whether patients with gout or dinosaurs with gout were indeed grumpy. I'll leave it to those of you in the audience who have gout, or perhaps more importantly, the partners of those people, to make that call. But if you do have gout, you'll be pleased to know you're actually in very fine company. And this was written in the mid-1800s. It may be some consolation to those sufferers from the disease who, like myself and others, are only modestly endowed with fortune and intellectual gifts, to know that great kings, princes, generals, admirals, philosophers, and many more of like eminence have suffered from the same complaint. And indeed, in a study of British genius, Havelock Ellis in 1904 wrote, "There is, however, a pathological condition which occurs so often in such extreme forms and in men of such preeminent intellectual ability, it is impossible not to regard it as having a real association with such ability. I refer to gout." So you're in good company. And here are just a few of the figures through history who have been thought to have gout. They include Galileo, Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, Henry VIII, Alexander the Great, George IV, and Sir Isaac Newton. And some of you may remember from more recent history, this fellow here, Harry Kewell, I think it wasn't the last World Cup, but perhaps the one before, when he couldn't play in several matches because he got gout in his foot. So, to those of you out there who might be gout sufferers, welcome to your fellow sufferers. Now, as I said, there's a lot of history about gout, and there is a fellow who did a lot of the early research called Alfred Garrod. And in 1848, he wrote a treatise of gout. And thanks to the internet, you can actually download this now, all 700 pages of it. I haven't read all 700 pages, I must admit, but I have read selected highlights. And in his treatise, he talked about 10 things that he identified about gout that he had shown from his observations with the patients that he saw, and also some of his research. And actually today, some of the observations that he made remain true and form the basis of much of what we know. And this was the first observation that he made, that true gouty inflammation is always accompanied by deposition of urate of soda in the inflamed part. Now, we don't call it urate of soda these days, we call them monosodium urate crystals, but we see the same thing down the microscope. And this is a picture taken from his treatise, and you can see it's a bit hard to see, but all these white lines on a background were the urate of soda crystals that he identified. Identifying these uric acid crystals in joint fluid remains the gold standard way of diagnosing gout. Technologies have moved forward. We can now see them at high magnification, and we can also see them in colour. And so these are the uric acid crystals, these needle-shaped things here, which are blue when they're in one direction to the light, blue that way, and then yellow in the other direction. And we can look at even more high power, and we can see here a white cell that's within the joint fluid, and these needle-like crystals pointing through it. And this cell is actually gobbling up the crystals in the joint to try and get rid of them and therefore settle the gout down. And I always think when I look at these pictures, it's not hard to imagine why gout's so painful when you envisage that you've got these needle-like things within your joints. And in fact, many patients will describe having gout as like having broken shards of glass in the joint. The other, one of the second things that Garrod talked about in his book, in his treatise, was that in true gout, uric acid is present in the blood in abnormal quantities. And this also remains true to this day, that we know that having high levels of uric acid in the blood is one of the key determinants of developing gout. And this diagram here shows that. This is from a study done in the mid-1980s in the US. And what they did was look at the risk of somebody getting gout depending on their uric acid levels. And 0.42 refers to this line down here. This is the upper limit of the normal range that we would typically see. So you can see if you've got relatively normal uric acid levels, your risk of getting gout is very low. If you've got high uric acid levels up to about 0.54, you've got about a 20%, 25% chance of getting gout within 5 years. So yet again, his observation from 1848 remains true. Now, so you might say, well, all this uric acid is bad, so why do we actually have it? And there is actually a very good reason why we have uric acid, because most other creatures can break uric acid down into something that's more water soluble and therefore can be peed out in the urine. But humans lost the enzyme that can break uric acid down in the Miocene period, which is about 5 to 20 million years ago. And there was a very good reason for this, and that's because uric acid actually increases the blood pressure. And so when we went from walking on all fours to walking upright, we needed to raise our blood pressure in order to get the blood up to our brain so that we could stay standing up and not faint. So there's a very important reason why we've got uric acid. Now, I hear some of you laughing, and I suspect you're laughing because of this fellow here. And in fact, unfortunately, we probably are evolving slightly too much towards this, and there are some key features of this particular fellow that may actually relate to him having gout as well, which I'll come on to. So there is a very good reason why we've got uric acid, but having too much can be a problem. Now, one of the things that I find when I'm talking to patients and talking to members of the public is that there are a lot of myths out there about gout. A lot of people know a story about gout or a joke about gout because there's been so much written about it and so much talked about it. And when I was thinking about what I might talk about tonight, I asked several people about some of the myths that they knew. And amongst some that I had heard and some that other people had told me more recently, I've come up with these 9. And what I hope to do tonight is just talk to you a bit about these 9 myths and hopefully dispel most of them and show you where our research has helped in dispelling these myths. And these are the 9: that no one gets it anymore, that it's a man's disease, so if you're a woman, don't worry, you'll be okay. It's not a form of arthritis. Yes, it affects your joint, but it's not actually arthritis. You can only get it in your big toe. It's a bit of a joke. It's not a serious condition, and it will go away on its own, so you don't really need to worry about it. We hear lots of myths about the medicines for gout, that you should take it when you've got an acute attack, that you should stop it when you've got an acute attack, all sorts of things about taking medicines, that nothing can be done about the gouty lumps that can develop under the skin, and perhaps the most commonly known myth that gout is the disease of kings because it's caused by eating and drinking too much rich food and wine. So let's have a think about some of these. So firstly, no one gets gout anymore. Well, indeed, gout is alive and well out there, rest assured, and particularly in New Zealand. And this is why I think we can easily consider this to be a disease of New Zealand. And some of you may have been here for Professor Vicky Cameron's inaugural professorial lecture a few weeks ago. And this is some work that Vicky and I did together based on some data that she had collected for the Community Heart Study, where they collected over 600 patients, urban Māori community, a rural Māori community, and an urban non-Māori community. And one of the questions that they asked in that study was, have you ever been told by a doctor you've got gout? And so this gave us the ability to make comment on how common it is in New Zealand. And there are 2 important things that I take from this slide. Firstly, you'll note that the rates of gout are much higher in Māori than non-Māori. And this is well recognised that Māori and Pacific Islanders in New Zealand have the highest rates of gout worldwide. And the other thing that you'll notice is that it looks like the rates of gout are increasing. And so the original studies back in the late 1950s, the rates of gout were reported to be about 7% of men, and these have gradually gone up with each study that has been done over time. Now, there are a variety of reasons why that might be happening. Some of it might relate to the fact that we actually see more people and diagnose this condition better, but I think there is, in fact, a true increase in the prevalence of this condition. So, yes, there's plenty of gout out there, and New Zealand has some of the highest rates in the world. So gout's a man's disease, and I was out and about with a friend earlier in the week, and I said to her, so what do you know about gout? And she said, oh, it's a man's disease. And she said, what's more, it's a fat, rich man's disease. And that is kind of the stereotype that people think about, and a lot of that has been driven by history, and we can see this sorts of pictures. This was done in the late 1700s. You can see he's a rather portly fellow with a well-dressed table sitting very comfortably, and there's no doubt that this would have been a rich man for his time. There is no doubt that gout is more common in men than women, but it does occur in women, but it is slightly different. Women tend to get gout later, and we think that the estrogen hormones that women produce protect against gout, and so most women won't get gout until after they've been through the menopause. It can also present slightly differently, so while men may get these very severe acute attacks of gout, women will often present just with these lumps that have developed in their fingers. And this is a lady's hands. I saw her shortly after arriving in Christchurch. And these white lumps that are pretty large, you can see on her finger joints, are actually all collections of uric acid crystals under the skin. And this is what we call tophi. So yes, while it is a stereotype man's disease, it does occur in women. Okay. So the third myth, that gout is not a form of arthritis. And I know that this particular picture has been shown, I think, at least twice in the health lecture series, if not more. Arthritis, the definition of arthritis is inflammation in the joints. And these are, in this nice picture here, the key features of inflammation being heat, redness, swelling, pain, and loss of function. So those are the key things that we see when a joint is inflamed. And I think you can see pretty clearly in the picture there that the ankle and big toe are clearly red, they're swollen, they look pretty hot and they look pretty sore to me. And you can imagine with a foot like that, that it'd be very hard to walk around. So gout is indeed a form of arthritis, and a particularly common one in New Zealand. Okay, gout only occurs in the big toe. Well, I'm not sure about the cartoon. I'm not sure there's any joints down there that can get gout, but there are numerous other joints that can get gout. And this is a hand on the top there of a patient that we looked after in the ward a few years ago, who had severe gout in just about every joint in his body. And as you can see, just about every joint in his hand there is affected by gout. We've got some pretty fancy ways of looking for gout these days. And this is a CT scan of the feet. So here are the toes. This is the big toe. This is the ankle area back here. And yes, all these red dots are actually uric acid crystals. And you can see that around the big toe, yes, there are very large collections of uric acid crystals, but there are also uric acid crystals scattered throughout pretty much all the other regions of the foot. So gout doesn't just happen in the big toe, it can happen in any joint in the body. Okay, is gout a joke? I don't believe anybody in this audience who's actually had gout would think it's a joke. Yes, it is a serious condition. If the inflammation remains untreated in the joint, it can actually damage the joint. I'm not sure how well you can see this on the x-ray of this hand. This is the same lady's hand who I showed you a few slides ago with the big lumps on the end of her fingers. These are the knuckle joints here. These ones you can see they look pretty nice and smooth round into the bones. Up here you can see that the bone has actually been eaten away by the gout. And so once that sort of damage is done to a joint, that's irreparable and can cause a lot of pain and also disability. We also increasingly recognise over the years that gout is associated with a number of other medical conditions, and many patients who have gout will also have diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol and high blood pressure. There does seem to be a link between all of these conditions, and that is the subject of much ongoing work. Okay, so it's a pretty serious condition. It can damage your joints. It can be associated with other medical conditions. So it's clearly something that we'd like to be able to do something about. And where my interests lie, as Richard said, I've been graduated as a doctor and developed an interest in rheumatology. And my interest really lies in answering some of the questions that arise when I see patients. And a lot of that revolves around improving the treatments that we've got for patients with gout. You'll be pleased to know that treatments have improved since the time of Garrett in 1848. And in his treatise, he had 5 key things that he identified needed to be done. Now, most of these remain true today, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I am going to talk about 2. And the second thing he said is that you need to render the blood pure. And I interpret this as meaning that you need to cleanse the blood of the high levels of uric acid. You'll be pleased to know that the methods that they used back in his time were bloodletting and purging and equally nice such things. We have actually moved on since then quite considerably. So the treatment of gout, there's a lot of myths and misinformation, I think, about the treatment of gout. Gout will go away on its own. I think it's fair to say that that is probably true in the very early stages of this disease. The first or second attack may resolve on its own without any treatment. It will take longer to resolve than if you go off to the doctor and get some medicine for it, but it will go away. Over time, however, those attacks will become more frequent, they will become more severe, and eventually it just won't go away. What has become clear is that, like many other conditions, we kind of have a target that we need to get to treat gout successfully. So for those of you who might have diabetes, you know your doctor will want your blood sugars to get to a certain level. If you've got high blood pressure, your doctor will want your blood pressure to get to a certain level. And we're the same when we treat gout. We want your blood uric acid levels to get to a certain level, because we know if we can get down to this critical level of 0.36, that the gout attacks will stop, that those monosodium urate crystals that we can see in the joint will dissolve and go away completely, and also that those collections of crystals underneath the skin, or tophi, will dissolve. Now, this isn't a quick fix. This does take time, but it will happen. So let's think about the ways in which we might be able to cleanse the body of uric acid. And this is a picture I took from a paper that came out a few years ago, and I like this analogy. So if we think about the body as a bath, we can fill up the bath with uric acid. And there's 2 ways we can fill up our bath. We can turn on the cold tap, and we can eat and drink food that will be broken down into uric acid. We can turn on the hot tap, and the hot tap is the body's natural way of breaking down cells. So all the time, cells are dying and new cells are being created within our body. And the cells that die, ultimately, part of them will be broken down to uric acid. Now, we also have a way of getting rid of uric acid, and that's the plug hole. And for us, the plug hole is the kidneys, and we excrete uric acid out through our kidneys and into the urine. So if we think about it that way, then we can clearly highlight these ways of being ways in which we could reduce uric acid. We can turn off the cold tap and alter what we eat and drink. We can turn off or down the hot tap and stop the uric acid being produced by the body, or we can pull the plug out of the plug hole a bit more and get more feed out through our kidneys. And a lot of our interests have revolved around turning off the hot tap, which is the ability of the body to actually make uric acid. And there's a drug that's been around for many years called allopurinol, which has been the focus of a lot of our work. So allopurinol was released onto the market in 1964. And you would have thought that for a drug that's been around now for nearly 50 years, that actually doctors would know how to use this drug properly. But unfortunately, I don't believe we do. I think that there are still myths out there about allopurinol amongst many of the medical profession. And some of these myths have been born out of observational studies that were done when this drug was very first released. And one of the key things that was observed was that higher doses are associated with increased risk of side effects from this drug, particularly in patients whose kidneys don't work very well. Now, there were some problems with these observations, which I won't go into, but this observation has really driven the way gout has been managed and how this drug has been used until very recent times. And the side effect that we worry about, particularly with this drug, is a very severe allergic reaction, which can cause a major blistering rash and can be very, very nasty. And clearly, we want to avoid this. So you might say, well, does it really matter? I mean, just give a little bit, and if a little bit is okay, but more might not be better, so just keep using the lower doses. But we know that if you use the lower doses, that it's not very effective. And this is from some work that I did with some collaborators in Auckland back in about 2005. And what we looked at here was the number of patients who actually got their blood uric acid levels low enough to control their gout relative to the dose of allopurinol that they were receiving. And what we can see is if you're on the dose that's suggested by how well your kidneys work, just under 20% of patients will actually get their uric acid level low enough to manage their gout. So 4 out of 5 patients will still have a high uric acid, will still continue to get gout, and will actually not have any benefit from taking the drug. So after I did some of my training here in Christchurch, my first run as a medical registrar here was actually with Dr. O'Donnell, who's in the audience tonight, as a general physician. And he, I think, contributed quite a lot to me developing an interest in rheumatology. And I did a year of training here, and then I went up to Auckland and worked at Middlemore Hospital with this chap here, Peter Gout. And Peter has been a rheumatologist in Middlemore for many, many years, and the community that Middlemore Hospital serves has a very high Māori and Pacific Island number of patients. And so he is perhaps one of the most experienced rheumatologists in New Zealand in treating gout. And when I was working there as a secondary registrar, he encouraged me to undertake this little study, which looked at how well we were using this drug at that time and how effective it was. And this, I think, was probably the first paper I ever published back in 1999 in the college journal. And I've highlighted in red here what the conclusion from that study was, which was that further study is needed to clarify whether in those who have not had satisfactory urate reduction, one can safely increase the dose of allopurinol above the recommended dosing guidelines. And this was really the start of my interest in this area. Now, nothing happens quickly in medicine, and it wasn't until 2004 when I came back to Christchurch that I really got the opportunity to come back to this area. And we were lucky enough to get funding a couple of years later to undertake a study to look at this exact question. And this study was subsequently published, and I just show you 2 pictures here which illustrate the point about using this drug. And the first is this here, which is a diagram which represents an individual patient from that study. You can see the blood uric acid levels here on the vertical axis. This dotted line is where we actually want to get the uric acid levels below. This is the dose of allopurinol, and you can see that this was actually a pretty pleasing result, that every time we increased the dose, so the uric acid level came down, and this patient did extremely well. And when we looked at the group as a whole of all 50 patients that were enrolled in that study, and the group as a whole, as we pushed the dose up, so the uric acid levels came down. So for the first time in a systematic way, we were able to show that you can push the doses of this drug higher, and that we could achieve the results that we were looking for in terms of its effect on uric acid, and we didn't have any serious side effects with this. And this has now been funded again to be a much bigger study, predominantly to look at more at the safety of this approach. So one of the things I think that this highlights is that you do need to keep taking your medicines in order to get this effect. And I'll illustrate this with this little diagram, just to say that treating gout is a long-term thing, and you can't stop and start the medicines if you really want it to work. And so the myth that you should only take them when you've got an attack or stop them when you've got an attack really doesn't hold true, and this is the reason why. We can see with this particular patient who was also in one of our studies that we followed quite closely, that this is the uric acid level here in the green line, this is the target, and this is actually the drug concentration that we can measure in the blood. you can see that as the drug concentration went up, so the uric acid levels came down very nicely to where we wanted them. And I'll give you two guesses as what happened at this particular point. And that was, he decided, since he'd had no gout for quite a while, that he was cured. And so he promptly decided to stop all his medicines, and that was promptly accompanied by the uric acid levels shooting way back up very high. And while he got away with this for several months, he did actually come back at 12 months saying, my gout's back, what am I going to do? And the answer to that was fairly straightforward: you need to go back onto your medicines. So you do need to take the medicines regularly for them to work. Okay, so the other thing that we'd really like to be able to do is to predict whether the treatment we give you is actually going to work well or not. And one of the key ways in which we can think about doing this is by looking at genetic markers. And some of you may have been here for Martin Kennedy's lecture, and this is the basis of much of his work. I think we have slightly differing opinions about how likely these things are to come to fruition. I think I might be on the losing end of a bet here, because I suspect it's slightly closer than I thought even a year or two ago. And this is why. If we go back to our picture of the bathtub, we've talked about turning off the hot tap and with the drugs. We can now think about opening up the plug hole a little bit more and letting more uric acid out through the kidneys. And there are a number of key transporters in the kidney that regulate this very tightly, and each of those is encoded by a specific gene. And so we have been involved in a large nationwide study that's being headed by Tony Merriman in Dunedin, and it's called the Genetics of Gout and Aotearoa study. Samples are being recruited from throughout the country. I think to date we've got just about 800 patients with gout and 800 patients without gout. And one of the first results that came out of this study was that genes that control the excretion of uric acid by the kidney are associated with high blood uric acid levels and with gout. And there's another important thing that this study revealed, which is depicted in this little table, is that may also partly explain why Māori and Pacific have higher levels of gout, because they have much greater expression of these genes and much greater expression of the enzymes that they encode, and so they have the ability to resorb much greater amounts of uric acid from the urine back into the blood, and thereby pushing the uric acid levels up. So here we can see an example of why there might be a genetic explanation for gout, and also give us clues as to why our Indigenous population may be more affected by this disease. Now you might say, well, that's all very well, but what use is that? Well, the use is this, is that there is a particular drug called benzbromarone, which acts on this key enzyme that's encoded by this gene that we have shown is particularly high in some groups. And if you take this drug, it stops that enzyme working so well, and it means that you can pee out more uric acid. So it may be that this is going to be one of those tests that we might do in several years' time when you come to the clinic. We'll take a blood test, look and see if you've got overexpression of this gene, and if you do, we might say, well, this drug might actually be a better option for you than the other drugs that we have. I think that is still some way down the track, but we're certainly working towards that. Okay, so what about the diet? I had two bits of advice from Professor Tony Kettle about tonight. One was to wear something dark because it looked better on video for the podcast, so I've taken that bit of advice. The second bit was to tell people what they could eat and drink, because that's all people really want to know when they've got gout. So I've followed both bits of his advice. And Garrod also noted this in his treatise in 1848, that you needed to carefully regulate the diet. Now, I think there's been a lot of research about the diet and gout recently, and things really have changed. But I think we're all familiar with this association between gout and alcohol. And Garrod wrote, "There is no truth in medicine better established than the fact that the use of fermented liquors is the most powerful of all the predisposing causes of gout. nay so powerful that it may be a question whether gout would ever have been known to mankind had such beverages not been indulged in. So it's been recognised as a risk factor for a very long time. So I thought what we might do now is have a quick straw poll. I've got 3 different types of alcohol here. This is nice cool gin, representing the spirits. Nice beer, I know there's a few beer drinkers out there, and a nice glass of red wine. And the question I want you to answer is, which of these do you think is most associated with causing gout? So does red wine more likely to cause gout? Is beer more likely to cause gout? Or is gin more likely to cause gout? So we're going to do a quick straw poll. Who votes for the beer? Hands up. Okay. Who votes for the gin? Oh, just a few. Okay, and who votes for the red wine? I think the red wine wins, doesn't it? Is that because you're all red wine drinkers? I tell you what, if you're red wine drinkers, you're really lucky, because the evidence is that this is least likely to raise your uric acid levels and cause gout, and these 2 are most likely to raise uric acid levels and cause gout. So you can have 1, but not a whole bottle. And this is why we can quantify the risk, and this was a study done in the US, and the numbers are a bit small, but I'll just tell you the guts of it. They basically looked at how much alcohol could you drink every day before you started to increase your risk, and your risk went up here to about 1.5 times if you had between 15 and 30 grams of alcohol per day, and went up to nearly 2 times if you had 30 grams of alcohol per day. This was my rough calculation. 15 grams of wine is about a glass, and 15 grams of beer is probably a small bottle. So if you drink that much every day, you'll put your risk up by about 1.5 times. Okay, so I think these are probably some of the key messages around gout. Don't drink to excess, particularly if your father had gout, because we know gout runs in families, so you're giving yourself a double hit. If you must drink to excess, don't stop eating, okay? We know that's a bad outcome if you drink too much without eating enough. And if you do have to eat, which you're going to have to do if you're going to drink, then you better think pretty carefully about what you're going to eat. And this is a sort of a gouty food pyramid, if you like. And I'm not going to talk about all of these foods, but I am just going to mention a couple. So what about tea and coffee? And again, this fascinated me when I read this in Garrett's treatise, because he said back in 1848, it's been suggested that coffee may possess the power of preventing gout, seeing that in countries where it is extensively drunk, as in Turkey, gout is scarcely known. But you better remember that in those countries they also drink a bit of wine as well. But in actual fact, he was right, and recent research has suggested that coffee consumption actually reduces your risk of gout. Now, the other thing you might have heard about in the media is about antioxidants and vitamin C, and I know there's been some discussion about these over several of these health lecture series. And it strikes me, I hope Marguerite Vissers is not here, who's our major, oh, there she is, our major vitamin C researcher, when I say that gout's been purported to do everything from cure the common cold to cancer, and recently it's also been suggested to be the new best thing for gout. And certainly in patients who don't have gout, the studies would show that the more vitamin C that you have in your diet, the lower your uric acid and the lower your risk of gout. And on the basis of that, it's been suggested that you should actually take vitamin C as a treatment for gout. And so one of the recent studies we've done has looked at this, and we enrolled a number of patients and gave them either allopurinol, which you'll remember is the most commonly used drug to treat gout, or we gave them 500 milligrams of vitamin C a day. And what we saw was this. This here represents the amount that the uric acid reduced. You can see that if you started allopurinol, which we know blocks uric acid production, you dropped your uric acid by quite a substantial amount. If you started vitamin C, it did virtually nothing. And I think that there's a number of explanations for this. Certainly, the way vitamin C is purported to work is that it increases the excretion of uric acid through the kidneys, so it takes the plug out of the plug hole a little bit. But we also know that in patients with gout, it's actually mainly a problem in the kidneys that causes the uric acid levels to build up, and so this is probably just not strong enough to overpower the underlying problem. The other thing that has received quite a lot of attention in the media is also about sugar consumption in gout, and we know that from the genetic study that there is a major interaction here between genes and sugars. And this is Caitlin, who is currently doing a BMed Sci with us on fructose absorption, with fructose being a type of sugar. But before she came to us, she did a summer research project down in the lab with Tony Merriman, and she looked at the interaction between sugar and genes. And this is the base data that we were working off, if you drink a lot of sugar-sweetened soft drinks, so your serum uric acid levels go up, and this is the number of drinks per day. So if you drink more than 4 sugary drinks per day, your risk goes up quite significantly. And what Caitlin showed with the data that we have collected throughout New Zealand is that if you drink a lot of sugary soft drinks or sugary drinks, and you have that particular gene that we talked about before, then you increase your risk about 4 times of getting gout. So we can say that this is not purely a dietary problem, it is not purely a genetic problem, but there is a major interaction, and all of these things build up to give people gout. Now I put this slide here because it reminded me of something a patient said to me. Well, how can I remember what I should eat and drink? And this patient said to me the rule that he lived by was he should never eat anything red. If it was red, it was out. And I think that there is an element of truth in that, but not altogether. Red meat, we certainly know. Crayfish, tomatoes, this is an interesting one. In the data from New Zealand, we asked the question, what foods trigger your gout? 20% of patients have told us that tomatoes trigger their gout. This is American, you can tell, because there are some foods I wouldn't consider really to be red, like chocolate brownies. I think there is a certain element of truth that maybe some of the red foods are not good, but I don't think it applies to all of them. So just drawing to a close, I hope I've shown you that there are a lot of myths about gout, but a lot of these can now be dispelled, and hopefully we can start to treat this condition a little bit better. And certainly our work is continuing in this area. Now there's still a lot that we don't know about gout, and I'd still like to know more about this condition. And for those of you who might have been in my clinic room, you'll know that my screensaver is full of penguins. And I have a bit of a fascination with penguins. I'd love to go to the ice. I put this photo up here because this is one of my very close friends who unfortunately works for Antarctic New Zealand, which means she gets to go to the ice every year. And she's told me in no uncertain circumstances that despite all my qualifications, I have no qualifications to get a job on Scott Base, not even as a cleaner. So I've been desperately trying to find another way to get to Scott Base. And recently I found it a year or two ago when I found this paper about the emperor penguins and what happens to their uric acid when they're sitting on the eggs. And you can see here, this is the uric acid and this is the time. Here's uric acid nice and low. At about 75 days, it suddenly shoots up. This is the same units that we use, so we think people are high when they're about 0.6. The penguins here get up to 2.4, but they can still get up off the egg and waddle away. So I think there are probably some explanations, but I'm hopeful that this might be my excuse for getting to the ice. So obviously none of our work would have been possible without our funders. We've had funders from funding from Arthritis New Zealand, Canterbury Medical Foundation, the University and the Health Research Council. And just in closing, obviously any research is a team effort. The Canterbury Rheumatology Immunology Research Group, I think, has gone from strength to strength. I need to pay particular thanks to my clinical colleagues, John and Peter, who support me to the hilt. And also to my research staff who work extremely hard seeing all the patients, and then I get to stand up here and tell you all about what hard work they've done and the results. I'd also just finally like to pay special thanks to this chap here, who some of you may recognise. I don't know whether you recognise this chap. This is Professor John Highton, who is one of our leading rheumatologists in Dunedin, who has also been a great mentor and supporter. And finally, I can see a number of our patients out there in the audience, and I'd just like to say particular thanks to the patients who give their time and a lot of their blood so we can undertake these studies. Thank you very much.